So the Carlin vanadium deposit is a shale-hosted mineral deposit. Now, we believe how it got here was the shape of the North American continent was quite different. We're basically on the edge, what would be the continent, and out this way would be actually seawater. Eventually, over time, hundreds of millions of years, there was mountain building out offshore with volcanoes and mountain building. Eventually, that terrain built up and closed off a passageway of salt water. So there was a landlocked seawater passage. That gradually got filled up, and in that seawater that was still trapped in there, gradually started to evaporate. The basin started getting filled in with clays and sediments. There were organisms that were living on close to the shoreline. Those organisms would flourish and die, and that carbon that they created ended up being like a sponge for all the metals that are dissolved in the seawater. And so as these sediments are coming in and the carbon is raining down from these organisms, it's absorbing all these metals like vanadium and silver and zinc. So you end up building a layer or a layer cake of this high-grade vanadium. It's probably related to this flourishing of these organisms at that point in time. And then there's further sediments that cover over that, like this unit. It's in orange above our shale unit, and more geology happens thereafter.
So Paul, some of these deposits are quite rich. You've seen intervals over 1% vanadium. What's your theory on why we're seeing such high-grade vanadium in this black shale versus others around North America?
That's a really interesting question, and my thoughts are that the sea passage created, as it filled in, there were subbasins that got filled in and restricted, and perhaps this area here had its own subbasin that had high concentrations of vanadium in the water. To add to that thought, I think that there may have been a structure, because we're in a very structurally complex continent margin here, where the Carlin gold deposits are all along here. So there's big structures that are happening. Maybe this structure tapped into this basin, and metals were basically coming up and bubbling into that new restricted basin. And so you have other metals that are associated with this deposit of silver and zinc and other metals that were potentially being supercharged by a structure that's come in and added to the overall amount of metals in that seawater basin.